commercial trucks to save the county up to $500,000 general fund dollars. There's not a whole lot of, it's not very convincing to say, well, we have something that will go at some, when the emergency comes. That's my concern about this. It's also my concern about spending more time trying to work out the details further. If we don't have time to get savings in the way of $500,000, then why should we be spending a whole lot of time, staff time, trying to get savings in the range of $45,000 or $12,000 here? So I'm just arguing in terms of the privatizing only the South Coast site. In fact, may be a reasonable option without a whole lot of work and working out the details, and then going forward from there. But I don't want to see us reopen the whole franchise fee discussion in an effort to avoid privatization, if privatization makes sense either in terms of money or in terms of services that may be evaporated in some future time. So that's where I see a real contradiction here. We really, if we don't have time to do the right thing, why should we have time to do the wrong thing? And that's my take on it at the moment. Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor Colfax, in order to move this along, would you make that in the form of a motion maybe to direct staff to negotiate for the privatization of the South Coast?
Well, I think it requires a little more work in terms of just pinning this down, in terms of the amount. We have a gap here between 65,000, 12,000. If we're that far off in our numbers here, I'd like to see some of that pinned down. But that in of itself is not sufficient. I think the key element here is to establish, I'd like there to be further talks between Willits and our staff with regard to what is out there that Paul Kaler put forward that could be revived, and what kind of effort would it take to revive that, rather than going to the other option. They seem to be choice one or choice two, but it's one or the other in the long run. And I think Paul Kaler made that pretty clear. What was that, a year and a half ago?
4 years.
Was that really 4 years ago?
4 years ago.
Wow.
Jennifer, you had a quick comment?
Supervisor Colfax, you weren't here when we did kind of go over the options, and I just wanted to kind of make a statement here to make it easier for everybody, I think. Alternative option 3 was basically trying to make the board understand that, and they may already understand that, but I don't want to reiterate or assume that you didn't understand, but the fact that in one of your exhibits, there is a detailed proposal as to how much it would cost for the site improvements, and that's around $500,000. I used that number because that was the maximum amount. There was actually 2 alternatives there. Mr. Kaler did always have that in the background to do the site improvements if we needed to. However, the emphasis that needs to be made here on the South Coast side is the fact that that is one of the sites that has the best site as far as the improvements that are already there and things that have been done there. If the Board of Supervisors wanted to pursue the South Coast site as doing the site improvements for commercial hauling trucking in order to get those savings to benefit solid waste of Willits and review that further, the suggestion earlier that was made, or the proposal that was made as far as this alternative, was that there would be several things that need to happen. It kind of goes along with Supervisor Smith and Supervisor McCowan, what they've already stated, which is if you want to pursue this option, you would have to have Solid Waste Division staff review with Solid Waste of Willits the franchise agreement, a permit would have to come back to the board for approval, and a lease agreement. And if this is the direction that you would like to go today, certainly staff can go forward with that, and that might be the easiest way to resolve some of these issues going forward.
Tom?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tom Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer. Another couple of points of clarification. The reason the Executive Office did the cost-benefit analysis was the previous board gave direction that they wanted this to be an independent analysis. So the direction was given to our staff to perform that analysis rather than solid waste. In the course of doing that analysis, I think, in outreach to our other partners, the executive office did check with MSWA. They came to many of the same conclusions that we came to. Then we double-checked some of our assumptions with solid waste. They came to some similar, solid waste, excuse me, county staff, not solid waste of Willits, came to some similar conclusions. So I think the privatization issue from our standpoint, we've vetted it as the board asked us to do, and what we see is there is some potential for the South Coast transfer station in some of the capital improvements that need to be made there. There is some opportunities that we could explore. If you want to call that privatization with some sort of partnership between county forces and solid waste of Willits relating to the use of the site and the capital improvements, I certainly think that's appropriate. And I think that's what both Supervisor Smith and Supervisor McCowan were recommending, is that we give direction to Department of Transportation Solid Waste to engage in discussions with Solid Waste of Willits over that specific site, over that specific issue, and come back to your Board of Supervisors. But from our standpoint, the privatization overall of all the sites is not something that we're prepared to support at this point in time.
In light of the general fund savings, you're not willing to even look at it?
I think Jennifer, as she's gone through in the complications that arise because of the Casper, as Supervisor McCowan has mentioned, the agreements we have at Casper, the lack of profitability in some of the other sites, fragmentation of the existing sites, the layoff issues of county employees. I just don't think there's enough in there for us to sink our teeth into at this point in time. I think we're all in agreement on that.
The thing that bothers me about that, this board is going to be here next August talking budget times, and we're going to be wrangling over whether we can fund issues, say like the Arts Council for $30,000, or something that's near and dear the Resource Conservation District for 10 or 15. We're going to be told, well, we don't have the money for that, but yet our CEO's office is overlooking the fact that we can have a 60, 70, maybe more general fund savings, and they're not willing to look at that further. That really upsets me. Supervisor McCowan.
Well, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, I believe they have taken a pretty solid look at it, and they've spent a rather exhaustive amount of time preparing the analysis, and the amount of savings is somewhat questionable. If it's projected to be $65,000 for all 5 sites, and if in reality you're only going to really get 1 or 2 sites, and it'd be interesting to see what is the breakdown per site that this is based on. But and I think privatization is the wrong term for what represents value to us here. It's not privatization in switching out 5 or 6 employees from the county to the private side, because after all, Solid Waste of Willits has made the point rather strongly that they would pay this, I believe, comparable salary and benefits. So it's not changing the employer of the individual site attendant. The real value, potential value at South Coast comes from being able to make the improvements that would then get us away from the doomsday scenario that we could be told Annapolis is no longer available. So, you know, I think that's what I'm hearing a majority of the board say we would like to explore is there a way to work in partnership to get those improvements constructed that could result in better service to the consumers at a lower price, perhaps increased revenue to the county. I'd like to see that be an option of it, because our costs for administration and post-closure monitoring and all of that continue on. So I think there needs to be a little something in it for the county also. But I think that's the clear path to having some savings, is to explore how do we get those improvements built in partnership.
Okay, so is there consensus